All right. Hello, everyone. Sam, we are live. It is a pleasure to have you again for this after show on this day, which is a special day for you. Your Chessable course is the deal of the day. How's it going today, Sam?
That's good. How are you?
I am doing all right. So we had some interesting matches today. I mean, I think you argued today's matches were more interesting than yesterday's. Am I right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, they were more surprising to me. I mean, neither of them seemed that much out of the ordinary, I thought, but there were definitely some things that stuck out at me as a little more unusual that happened today than what happened yesterday.
Okay. And then we have a couple of things going on, by the way, today with you, right? So we're doing this after show first. Then we have an opening clinic where you're going to be answering questions on all kinds of openings. And then after that, you're going to play some banter blitz. So hopefully by the end of it, you're not too tired and lose all your games to our members. But you are pretty strong, so you might be able to handle this.
Yeah, no, I might lose all the games anyway, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that. The opening clinic should be helpful. I mean, obviously, I'd like to shamelessly advertise my chessable course, which is the deal of the day today on the Semi-Slav, and we'll take every opportunity I can to do so. But I'm also happy to answer non-Semi-Slav questions, and the Banter Blitz, I'm going to specifically ask to play black every game, but I'm not going to go abort the game if somebody plays E4 against me or something like that.
Sounds good. All right. So today's matches. I guess I'll start. I'll start. I'm gonna switch our scene here. Um, so I'm actually showing. Well, I'm showing a board. And I guess first I can put the results for today actually. Um, so today we saw a win of Fabiano Caruana, the American in this field against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and we saw a pretty convincing win of MVL Maxime Vachier-Lagrave against Anish Giri, who I guess despite his secret training matches that he had on Chess 24, had a little bit of trouble today getting going. The first two games were pretty difficult for him, and so we'll go through that and then I'll just post also real quick the standings after today, because of course some players have played yesterday, so they kind of alternate. So we have the people who won their matches outright, so without an Armageddon game. So MVL, Ding Liren, and Fabiano are in the lead with 3 points. We have sort of a kind of soccer-like or football-like scoring system. We're similar a little bit to the NHL, the way the NHL does it in the U.S. these days with sort of wins in overtime. They have a little different thing for a sport that nobody in Europe is following. Actually,
And
nobody in
that
the
we in
U.S.
America
maybe either,
follows
other
either.
than me. But no, actually, I've always been a little bit of a hockey fan. But then Magnus Carlsen with 2 points because he won an Armageddon, and Hikaru with 1 point because he lost an Armageddon. And then the people who lost their matches, Ali Reza, Nepomniachtchi, and Giri, have 0 points. So all right, let's. What do you want to start with in terms of games, Sam? Today, do you want to
Well,
start
I
with?
would definitely go with the MVL Geary match because
All
the
right.
first thing, I mean, I guess I'd rather start with game two, honestly, but for obvious reasons. But basically, MVL, Mr. Grunfeld, who like just plays the same opening every single game. Grunfeld and Neidorf with black, no exceptions, no nothing, never switch. Sorry, what problem?
My 3-year-old son is asking me something, and so I'm trying to tell him that I cannot help him right now. But in this quarantine world is a bit of a different world. Soren, can you ask mommy to help you? Okay, give me one quick second. I have no idea what's going on here, but it seems like a crisis. So Sam, I'll,
Okay, so
I'll
I'll
let you
just keep.
speak for a second.
Okay. Yeah. So while Pascal is off dealing with the kids, basically MVL, Mr. Grunfeld, just every time playing Grunfeld Neidorf game after game after game with black, not scared of anybody, sticks with the same repertoire. If he played all the way 15 consecutive moves one game, and you go into those same moves, he's very likely to do it again. This has always been his style. He deviated from his normal Grunfeld today for the first time I've seen in a very, very, very long time. And guess what opening he chose? The Semi-Slav. So I was very happy to see that even for a guy who's completely hell bent on playing the Grunfeld every game, when he wants to expand his repertoire and do something, the first place he looks is the Semi-Slav. So this is a testament to how good that would be and why you should buy the course. But yeah, he actually made it look very good. And if I think one thing that went wrong for Anish in the second game, so there are two things I would say overall. One is the line he specifically chose against the Semislav. It's outside of my course's recommendation, so it's not something I know as much about. But basically, the line he chose, I think, allows Black to put his bishop on g7, and in fact, almost forces it because I think everything else doesn't equalize. And MVL putting the bishop on g7 is going to feel very at home. And very quickly, the position looked a bit like a Grunfeld, where White had some extra space and Black was trying to break down the center with direct moves and even sacrifice the pawn. And even though the opening was a semi-Slav, it played out a lot like a Grunfeld, and it really fit into MVL's repertoire.
Yeah, and so this was the second game, right? So do you want to go through the first game first, or?
Yeah, let's do the first game first.
Yeah. So the first game was also a little bit of a surprise because on the first move he played d4, which I think is extremely unusual for him. I mean, I don't actually remember him playing d4. Do you, or?
There was an era when he was playing it, not super often, but now and then. But that era is mostly gone. I don't know. He threw out d4. This was surprising.
It was kind of funny because the commentators who were Jan Gustafsson and Peter Svidler mainly, and also Lawrence Trent. But let's say the Peter and Jan were both saying like, what a strange decision to go for this variation where Anish's theory is so solid, and then afterwards they actually kind of revise themselves because he managed to. I mean, I think he maybe was just okay with getting an endgame like this where he feels that he can play 100 moves and has some winning chances. And even if the computer says it's equal, it's a little bit like what we talked about yesterday. Like it's not so easy, especially with this time control. I don't know if that's how.
Yeah, I've played Queen C2 Nimza before, but I never really believed in this position after E4 on the fifth move. This position that they got, like, I think there was like a Mamajarov Caruana game that went this way as well. I thought it was basically fizzling out to a draw almost immediately.
Yeah, all of this I think has been played like even I had a game with this position against in the Pro Chess League at some point that went, I think, so far as a lot of these moves. So all of this has been played, and I think the most recent that they were talking about is a Vitugov game from Wei Kanze, which I think reached the position. So all of this, I think all the way to here, even when it gets to the end game, to bishop f5. And I think I want to say that actually in this Vitugov game, rook c to d8 was played. I think that's right, but I'm not totally sure.
Instead of rook c4?
Yeah, instead of rook c4, I think rook c to d8 was played. I mean, which does allow White to keep the knight, I guess, if they want. But I think that game was drawn pretty quickly with like it went e6, pawn takes e6.
Yeah, well, basically a position like this where you have a little bit of practical pressure, you're really relying on your opponent messing up because you obviously know that here you're not really going to get very far by like trying to push for a win. You just have to sort of hope they make a mistake. And the way that people make mistakes in these positions is when they get low on time. And where a second, because realistically, 1 second best move or 1/3 best move is not really going to do it for you. You're going to need people to consistently make second and third best moves because it's going to be very hard for someone to actually, like, if you consider this position after bishop f5, for example, like, try to imagine how Black can like blunder material. It's not easy to do. I mean, it's not like he's going to go blunder the game away and lose a lot of material with some stupid move. You're going to make like small errors to lose control of the game. The way that happens is if you're lower on time. So it's not surprising to me that in Vaikanze, when, which has even a longer time control than normal, that you're really not going to get very far playing this way with White. I don't know. You'll get some position where Black could, in theory, fall apart if little by little if he starts making small mistakes. But when you get to this position, you're still in preparation on move 20, and you've got 2 hours for 20 moves. Like, you're never going to lose an endgame like this. But in Rapid, I think it's a much more feasible try. And Anish's position, it's not like he blundered or anything. He just sort of slowly made some second best moves here and there and eventually got outplayed in a way that I can't imagine would have ever happened if he got in this position in Classical.
Yeah. Someone in the chat is asking, is he sort of some speculation as to why he changed his openings today? Is it because he doesn't want to show prep, ahead of the candidates? Is it because it's a different time control? I think it's just a mix of all those things. I mean, of course, I think the strategy for a rapid game is quite a bit different from a strategy for a slow game, and the level
Yeah,
of
I mean,
confidence you have in like playing certain types of positions in rapid can be totally different. And so, and I think in general, like it's helpful to make more practical decisions rather than always go for the most concrete, like absolute best move in every case, right? Like you got to kind of decide quickly. So probably a mix of those things would be my view.
well,
But like, yeah. So I just want to go
for
through
me,
some
it's
of them.
very interesting, and it's hard to tell. I've always found it interesting when a player who really has a set style breaks character as to why they would choose to do that at this and at what particular moment they choose to do it and why. So, for example, I don't really like. I play different openings all the time because I like playing fresh positions. I like keeping people on their toes. I don't want to walk into just preparation directed specifically at me. I mean, obviously, you can't always avoid that. I mean, it's not like at some point you run out of openings to play, and I want to stick with good ones, and but I have a wider repertoire than most, and MVL is completely on the other end of the spectrum. And for me, it's easy to say, well, he did what I generally think is best. Like, I mean, he did the kind of style that I think is the best way. So, if you had asked me, I'd be like, oh, he saw the light. But I'm sure that that's not at all what his reasoning was. I think that he had other reasons, and I really just don't know. Another case of breaking character, for example, is Magnus when he's usually someone who moves around quite a bit and tries different things to keep people on their toes. He doesn't like drawn out theoretical debates game after game. And for example, in the World Championship match, starting from like game 7 or something, I was doing the annotations for chess.com, and I think every single time I said, and at this point, I think Magnus will pivot and stop playing the Sveshnikov, and he never did. This totally broke character as well. And I never got a chance to ask him about that decision. And honestly, even if I did, he might not tell me what his thoughts were. But it's very hard to know when and why somebody who normally has a very specific style breaks character at any
Yeah.
given moment. I don't know.
It felt like it was easier to explain yesterday with like Dingley Ren, because he clearly suffered in the Marshall, like you were
Yeah,
saying, he had trouble getting out of the opening in a candidates tournament. So it makes sense that, especially for rapid, he's like, you know what, let me not test my opponent's preparation to Marshall and just play something different. So,
sure.
but obviously MVL is in a little bit of a different situation. Although he also didn't get like the most fun positions, I think, in a Grunfeld. In at least one game, he was lost in the candidates, or close to lost in a
Which
end
one was
game.
that?
It was, I guess, against Wang Hao. Although I don't know if the opening was really the culprit.
The
Um,
opening was in that game, and I don't think he was ever actually lost
yeah,
in the end.
there was a time where he could actually repeat with like Queen H4 and stuff. Well, or he could have tried to repeat, and I don't know that White had anything. So maybe the opening was not the culprit. So I'm just speculating. But so let's go through the moves. I mean, there's it wasn't really like obvious where, like Anish didn't do anything that was outrageously bad. It was just like little things somehow, like here the position already seemed a little bit unpleasant, and he hasn't done anything. All he's done is king g7, h6, b6,
Which
nothing.
moment do you say here? Because I can't follow your board at the same time.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm on move 31 after rook to e3. um
Yeah, I mean, this has got a little unpleasant, but it doesn't feel that bad. I don't like the decision to play h6. I think the pawn would be better on h7. I mean, on h6 it will be more of a target. Like for example, the pawn on h7. If I put my rook on the 7th rank, I don't actually have any weaknesses in my position. While if I have the pawn on the 6th rank, I could totally imagine it takes me. I can very easily give you a constellation where that pawn falls off the board. Bishop c6 or rook c6, bishop c2, and you lose your h6 pawn.
right.
Like now,
Yeah,
that's
just the
not what's
g6.
happening
So
right away.
the g6 square is weak, is basically what you're saying, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's not like that's about to happen right away, but like if you see sort of how the game ended up going, where like at some point White has played Rook A6 and King F5, and at this point, it's clear things have gone very, very wrong for Black already, and they would have gone very wrong also in this position if the pawn were back on H7. But if the pawn were back on H7 and he had the G6 score under control, I think his defensive chances here would be way higher.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think this H6 move really was more painful than it might look at first glance.
Yeah, and I guess his it's a little bit like he's playing down a pawn, because he doesn't really manage to get his majority going on the queen side to create a pass
And White's
pattern.
bishop was very well placed on d5. I mean, it had some very good squares to work with. Yeah, I think h6 was probably the biggest mistake Anish made, but he didn't make any like blunders or anything. He just sort of slowly made a bunch of second best moves that.
Yeah, it's that's why we could look at this endgame for a long time, and to try to pinpoint like the real big errors. I mean, of course, as always, when you get to the end of the game, it seems like the mistakes were big here, but and
This
now
whole
now it looks like that
bishop c5 to
configuration.
bishop c5 to b4 to e1 did not strike me as brilliant either. But I mean, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
even after like he got the position on say move 36, bishop f6, bishop e6, rook c7. I mean, even this position probably wasn't that bad. But I mean, again, like this position, say after move 38, king e4, bishop
yeah.
e7, rook e3,
And
king
then
f6,
when you
39.
fast forward 10 moves, then it does look really bad. Like after king e6, it looks like it's
No,
probably
but if you
lost.
look at the position on move 40, like it's a little unpleasant for black for sure. But I just can't imagine Anish losing this position in classical chess.
Someone is asking me in the chat. Well, there's two questions actually. Uh, well, first question is one that we've sort of covered. It was, do you think that this line with castles and e4 is dangerous for black, or can he hold an equal endgame? Which, well, I'll let you answer it. I guess I could try also, but I'll let you.
I think a strong player will realistically never lose this endgame in classical chess, basically ever. For Blitz and Rapid, it could be dangerous, I guess, but I mean that's the reason that it's showing up in Blitz and Rapid and
Yeah,
not in
the thing about this line, and it's like this in a lot of modern theory, is that it looks like such a complicated line, but basically it's been worked out to lead to this kind of end game by force. And there's a few different variations of it, but it's so it's at this point it's not really a sharp line anymore. It's more a line to get an end game that's impossible to lose for white and maybe hard for black to lose. So I don't think you're going to see that many games in practice unless they find a real improvement.
Sorry. For what it's worth, I've played Queen C2 Nimzo myself over the years, and I've never with white tried this E4 line. I don't believe in it. I think black will be okay.
All right, so that says something from a very very strong theoretician. I'm just showing the final position here where white has two pawns, so he's just going to play king g6 and g5 and f6, and it's there are some setups where sometimes black can hold down two pawns in opposite colored bishops, but obviously that this one is not one of them.
Yeah, you would need to be able to block it on the black scores, and that's not particularly close to happening. King g6, g5, f6 is coming.
That is what I just showed, and so we'll move on to game two. So that was already a strong start for MVL, whose opening play was rewarded by what looked like a fairly, he kind of made it look easy to win this endgame. So second game, he surprises us, like Sam was talking about for a little bit, by not playing the Grunfeld. So he plays d4, d5 already. Yeah, he probably knew that today was the Semislav day on Chess 24. So he plays bishop g5, but now though he goes astray from your repertoire and plays.
Yeah, he played h6, which is it's a different direction. But it's I wouldn't be surprised if Maxime was sort of looking at my analysis and basically found that the Cambridge Springs didn't really appeal to him, but was happy with the rest of it. I also wouldn't be surprised if he picked up the Semislav on his own without any help from me, because obviously he's more than capable of analyzing very well.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, h6, while this deviates from my repertoire, the fact that he played the Semislav at all means that he probably drew a lot of the same conclusions as I did about some of the other positions within it.
Yeah. No, that's it. It's interesting for sure. And so here, white plays bishop f6. They don't go for the bishop h4 stuff.
I don't know. I mean, I think the line Anish played was a very poor choice against Maxime. It's not a bad opening, but to go into this line that basically where black's best option by far is to put his bishop on g7 and play a position that looks more like a Grunfeld, it feels like the wrong practice.
Yeah. So this is something that was talked about by Magnus on the stream too. Is that it's kind of amazing that he. Anish finds like one line where he's able to play a Grunfeld style position. And now things actually went way wrong very quickly for Anish. And I don't know how much.
Well, I can say, like, if you're playing knight e5 and f4, two moves that do not help you complete your development, there's nothing wrong with playing this way, but you really have to know what you're doing, because if you do these things that sort of break the fundamental principles of chess, Punishment can be very, very severe if you make a mistake. I mean, for example, I still lose sleep over this horrible game I had with Jeffrey Zhang at the U.S. Championship, where I prepared this really interesting line in the Scotch and got like according to my analysis, not even a better position. I would say a much better position, but I forgot one move order, and so I slipped up with my move order, which I think is roughly what happened to Anish here. I believe what he wanted to play was h4 on move 10 and then meet queen e7 with queen c2, which is relevantly different. But it's but when I mixed up this move order against Jeffrey, oftentimes if you play like some reasonable position, like even like a sharp one, like if you play some Najdorf or something and you forget if you're supposed to play a3 first or g4 or blah blah. I mean, you'll still get a game, but if you do something really provocative, like I did with Jeffrey and like Anish sort of did with MVL here, and you mess up a move order, you can immediately be lost, and that's what happened to me. Like I went from like clearly better to dead lost with white on like move 10, and that was if you're playing something provocative, you really got to know your move orders right, and I think this is what happened to Anish here.
Yeah. So here after f4 castles, queen c2.
Yeah, I think that's, if I recall, I think that with color, Anish played the black side of this position against Mohamed Yarov and faced h4, and then I believe that game continued.
This is h4 on which move? Move 10,
I
right? So
believe,
instead of queen c2, you play.
If I'm not wrong, the game continued h4, and then after either like knight d7 or queen e7 or something, then and only then white played queen c2.
Right.
I think this is probably what Anish was trying to do. I don't know the game off the top of my head.
No, that's interesting because queen after queen c2, c5.
Yeah, this looks like he goofed enormously, and after c5,
because now it's it just looks very pleasant for black with the two bishops, and white is still a couple of moves away from castling kingside if they want to go that way.
Yeah, just on f4 is totally senseless now. I mean, this was,
so now
when
he
you
plays
stuff like this and lose the time to try to like take space. You really have to keep the center closed, and as soon as MVL got c5 in under good circumstances, it's already very bad.
Yeah, and I guess now he played pawn takes c5, which maybe made matters worse. And knight c6 was a strong move. And already like a rough position to play for
but what do you want Anish to play here? Like, he can play queen f2 and just be slightly worse with white already and already down a game. Like, this is not a recipe for winning.
No, I agree. This is already very unpleasant.
I kind of like taking the pawn and hoping for the best. I mean, of course.
Maybe it made sense as a practical choice, but the position after knight c6, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop d3, queen e7. It just wasn't a fun position for white to play. Knight a4, e5. So he's opening up things for the bishops. Pawn takes, queen takes. So he gets his pawn back with a good position because he has the bishop pair. So we're on move 17 now after bishop e6. Hard to suggest like really good moves for white. He tried to trade bishops with bishop c4, which is natural. You want to trade off one of the bishops in the bishop pair. Unfortunately, it doesn't completely solve the problems because the knight on a4, I guess, is just a pretty bad piece.
This game was like fantastic for Maxime. I mean, he plays the semi-Slav and ends up in a dream Grunfeld. I mean, what?
It is. Just definitely when things are going your way in a match. He must have certainly felt that way. So the game ended pretty nicely. I mean, he eventually gets the rook to d4, then the bishop to e5. So he's threatening obviously things like rook h4 followed by queen g3 among other things. The knight on a4 is still caught offside, and so Anish plays the move g3, which is natural. Queen h5, strong move. He's threatening rook takes a4. With the queen having to defend both pieces. No easy move here. He's also threatening the pawn on g3. So if white plays knight c3, there's bishop takes g3, which is really bad. So he plays rook g2. Now strong, not difficult move, but rook d1. Really strong move. The main idea is if rook takes, queen takes d1, rook g1, queen f3, rook g2. There's rook d8, and rook d1 is cannot be stopped in any kind of serious way, so it just wins. So after rook d1, it's it's basically well, it is completely lost. Although he could have tried. I guess the best move to try was g4. Um,
Yeah,
so he,
you're not going to save that position.
yeah, it's but yeah, no, that position is just horrible with the king like this and the black rooks being super active. So
You're saying just a lot today, but in this particular case, I'm going to tolerate it because you
yeah,
happen to.
I'm trying to take it out of my vocabulary, but I clearly have not succeeded yet. So this was game two. It finished. Actually, I should show the final position after rook d1. He played queen c4, and black played queen f3, which wins on the spot. It's the same variation really that I showed. It forces rook takes d1 when black plays queen takes, and then queen back to f3 and rook d8, and that's it. There's no king g1 because of bishop d4 check, or among other things. So yeah, so that was game two. And it's hard to come back from being down 2-0. The next game, I think we're maybe going to skip this one so that we have time to go through the other match, because the other match was pretty interesting. So
Yeah, sure.
I say we switch to that. Although Anish did have some pressure in that one at the end, he was never really that close to winning, I think. And um, so Maxime won this match convincingly, with in particular the Semislav coming to help him in the second game. So the first game, Fabiano against Jan Nepomniachtchi, interesting to see Jan repeat the French which he had played in the candidates. Were you surprised by that or not? Or?
Yeah, that was my first big surprise. I mean, it's French. I don't know what it is with Jan. I mean, he's been a lifelong Najdorf player, and the Najdorf's obviously a totally first-rate opening, and a lot of people just play it their whole careers. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you can sort of understand a guy like him who's sick of getting hit with targeted preparation or wants a fresher position or something new. That's totally understandable, but the winnower and the perk are basically what I've seen him do recently. He seems to be getting clobbered. These openings don't necessarily have the best reputation. He seems to get bad positions all the time. It feels like there's better options for you out there if you want to branch out a bit. I mean, I don't think branching out in itself is wrong at all. I think he's not choosing the right way. I mean, this game he sort of made it work. In rapid, you can play anything, but at some point his position looked very suspicious. Like, say, like on move 20 where Caruana played bishop d3, which gives up the bishop pair. If white, like, I don't know, rook c1, defend the pawn, and then start throwing g4 later, I mean, it looks very uncomfortable for
yeah.
black.
So I hadn't even gone through the first moves yet, but so yeah, Fabiano repeats the h4 line, which was played a couple times in the candidates and seems to be one of the key sort of debates in this line right now.
I don't even think that h4 is a particularly good move. I mean, that's only my opinion, of course, but even this, which I don't think
we have a visitor
challenging, is really giving Jan a lot of headaches game after game. I mean, he lost to MVL horribly. He was in serious trouble with Alexienko. In this game here, he got some unpleasant ending. I mean, winnower French is, it sort of had its day, was my thought. And if Jan can resurrect it from the dead and prove that it's okay for black, by all means, more power to him. I'd love to see it. I always like it when there's more possibilities and more openings that can be tried. But this really did not look very impressive. I mean,
yeah. And so Fabiano went for rook b1. I think in the candidates, the games went with knight f3, all of them, but all of them. There's only two, I think, but it was like knight f3, b6, bishop b5 check, and one went with bishop b2, one with bishop d3. But yeah, so this one is this line was definitely a different one, and Fabiano seemed to be well prepared. Both sides blitzed until, like you were saying, about move. I think he played king f2 very quickly on move 19. And then on f6, he started thinking. And yeah, like you were saying, rook c1 looked like a good move. And I did look at rook c1 a little bit. It doesn't seem so easy for black. I agree. I mean, you have g4 coming. The knight coming to b5 somehow can be annoying in some of these positions too. I also look, just because it's kind of natural for the human eye, but d4 for black tends to be really bad, because after knight e4, somehow the knights just don't have good outposts. And then the h-pawn is still rolling, so you don't want to give that bishop against the knight on e4.
There's a lot of things possible where white gets the queens off and keeps his bishop pair and his h-pawn, but he loses his extra pawn and black gets some central presence. Like, there was a Huschenbeth Nidich game at the World Cup as well, where white won very convincingly. Like, these positions, I think, are very dangerous for black, and and even this particular line, which I don't think is the best one. I mean, I don't know. Realistically, I haven't been checking the French as of late, and these guys preparing for Nepo have. So more likely than not, they're right and I'm wrong. But I mean, even this line, it feels very dangerous for Black.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I was
Caruana seems,
surprised that Fabiano played Bishop D3 on move 20 because that Bishop trade
yeah. I
just
mean, he
didn't.
missed it to some degree. I mean, it's still not so bad, but at
Yeah.
some point,
Well, so Bishop D3 itself was actually bad, which I mean I understand is not so obvious in this time control. There was the move E4, which was pointed out by a couple of people. But E4 I'm showing it because it is a pretty neat tactic. Uh,
uh,
White is actually losing a piece by force. I mean, it's not as lost as losing a piece can be sometimes.
right.
Um, but so if pawn takes e4, pawn takes e4, there's a piece on d2 hanging. So he's got to make a move like bishop b5, and then or bishop anywhere. The same response, e3 check, and then something takes on e3, and then you play d4. I mean, it's not actually all that lost. Bishop takes d4.
I don't even
Uh,
know if I would necessarily think if I didn't see a computer, I don't even know if I would think white is worse there.
Yeah, I mean it's possible because you have two pawns, you have two bishops, and some pressure. So maybe,
Very good pawns at that. I
yeah.
mean, look, if computer says it's bad for white, I'm sure it is. But I
No, I
mean,
mean, but I think if you saw e4, I think you would play it, right? Like you wouldn't
yeah,
reject it. But so he goes king f7, and someone was asking earlier. Someone was asking about time management in the chat, and that the time management has been strange. I mean, this is something that, especially if you listen to our commentators, seemed apparent that players were not taking that long, like almost playing like blitz, and sometimes
well,
had like 8-9 minutes, like kind of deep into the end game.
I mean,
And
this is a very unusual time control. That the only thing I was seeing is sort of similar as the Pro Chess League, but
well,
uh,
but this is a time control of the World Rapid and Blitz like Rapid Championship, and I think right,
what?
and
No, no, Rapid Championship is much longer. They have 15 minutes or something.
yeah, that's what they have here. They have 15 minutes.
No, this was eight. I thought this was 8 minutes or something.
No, they have 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Then
So
I guess
it is the same time control, but
then I,
they've just played fast, and I don't know if they played fast also in the World Rapid Blitz. I wasn't there, but
the thing is, like, when you're playing on a computer, you're playing fast. I mean, at least for me, I've like never played, like, not since the days of the good old U.S. Chess League where I ever like been playing like real serious length games on the computer. When you're playing the computer, like a lot of these guys, probably the most common time control they play on the computer is like 1-0 or maybe 3-0.
yeah.
Like, you're not used to like looking at a computer screen and like taking your time. I think that's part of it.
No, that's probably fair. So now they get this end game that and we're gonna run out of time here before the opening clinic, so I'm gonna try to go kind of quickly. But it
Well,
looks
I don't
like
even I don't,
Nepo.
I don't even
Sorry.
want to discuss this night endgame. I mean, it looks so deep that I mean, I would think this is worth serious study. There's no way you can summarize it. And come to
Yeah,
some.
no, exactly. It looked like obviously Black was very close to winning, and um,
Yeah, after my disaster in Vaikanze, where I had a very difficult winning night endgame against Richard Report, and I didn't quite manage. I've been looking at them pretty closely, and I'm definitely going to look at this one. Like
yeah, this
today.
one isn't. It's definitely interesting. So we're gonna save this analysis. Maybe we'll have to do a workshop just on this end game because yeah, it's one of these things where there's a lot of maneuvering and it's hard to figure out. But Fabiano, like one thing you can say about him is he's definitely very tenacious. He is hard to beat, and so he managed to hold this game, and then so we'll just go to the second game.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, that's probably his best quality actually as a player.
yeah,
That
he's really
and preparation. I mean, like
yeah.
I don't know. I lost to him the first time we played a long time ago, back when I was much younger and not very good at chess. But like ever since then, I've really like outplayed him more or less every game we've played and never won. Like I get good positions, but he's a very resourceful defender, and he's just drawn every time. But
So in this second game, do you know this variation with so this is a little bit like we had a different version of this yesterday, um, but this is a bishop c5 like an
yeah, well,
Arkhangelsk.
I mean, it's a big difference with Black putting the bishop on b7 instead of.
Yes.
I mean, he can play rook b8 instead, like Magnus did, which
Yeah.
is classically speaking, more ambitious because I believe the bishop on b7 is misplaced, and in a lot of cases, once white goes c3 and d4, the bishop would really be much happier on g4 because it pressures the d4 pawn, which is harder for white to protect than the e4 pawn. Like the bishop on b7 is, especially if white plays a d3 setup, it doesn't make very much sense there. But if you play rook b8, you're allowing knight takes e5, which I always thought was a serious line, and Magnus even lost yesterday. But well, I guess Caruana didn't want to allow it, so he chose this bishop b7 line, which I don't know. I mean, it's certainly an interesting variation, but
yeah, he didn't get. I guess he didn't.
At that point, I didn't love his position.
Yeah, you didn't love his position. You said.
Yeah, I mean, knight a3 from Nepo looked a little strange, but like
yeah,
if you were,
it was a little strange, but it looked like sort of concrete, and it wasn't so easy for black to play. So he played this. It was all kind of odd, like knight a3 with the idea of playing bishop d5 and then c4.
Yeah, but before long, I started to like black's position. I mean, at some point, like if you look at the position on, I guess by like move 25 or something. At this point here, I thought like black has a comfortable bishop pair and no particular problems. Like this.
Yeah.
Was, I mean, it's not that much, and it's not too surprising that Nepo didn't lose it. But you know, I thought that knight a3 was ill-advised, and maybe he could have put more pressure with another move. But at the same time, Caruana was blitzing here. I mean, I don't know. Maybe knight c3 is a stronger move, but if Caruana was blitzing at this point, I'm sure he had figured out something.
Yeah,
I mean, he was playing with one of the candidates.
Then things went way wrong for black. Like around move 30, to where it became like just actually horrible. And
yeah, I mean, allowing knight g4 was
so something went way wrong here. Like the position went from being maybe better for black to just being losing, which can happen in these quick time controls.
Basically, this move rook takes d6 on move 34, where apparently like I guess knight h4 won the game on the spot, but there were also really good moves like knight h2 would probably be my instinct. I mean,
Fabiano was giving a quick interview after the match, and he mentioned knight h4, and knight h4 basically kind of ends the game. I guess there's really no.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, like especially against Caruana. Like I said, I mean, obviously is like probably pretty darn good at every phase of chess, but specifically like tenaciousness, I think, is where he shines the most. And you play rook d6, and after rook b6, you get this pawn up endgame against the pawn.
I'm just showing on the screen here the difference is that after knight h4, like let's say you play king g7 just to defend the bishop on g6. Then after rook takes d6, obviously you can't play rook b6 now because there's queen takes f6 check, and the rook hangs in the back. So so that's the big difference. So.
This was one of those moments where I think Nepo really could have done himself a favor by spending more time. He had 8 minutes here, and after queen f4, bishop g6, like at this point, you don't want to play too slow all the time, but here you should smell blood in the water. And given that he played rook d6 almost immediately, and then after rook b6, it seems like he spent at least a little bit of time. My guess is what happened was he missed rook b6, and then, when he saw it, it's not like too hard to find that he can go into the pawn up endgame, but basically, if you missed rook b6, essentially that means after rook d6, you believe your opponent is going to resign. And if you believe your opponent's going to resign after your next move, there's really no point in playing immediately because if you spend some time, one of two things will happen. One, you'll find out that you're right, and then he is going to resign and you don't need the time. And two, if you're wrong and you realize there's a resource here, like I'm sure Ian immediately saw after it came on the board, then you're going to be happy that you spent the time and found it. So I think this was a moment where I think that
agreed. This is one of those times when the time management.
Yeah, I mean, this ending, I wouldn't be surprised if this ending. I mean, it's certainly very good chances for white, but I think objectively speaking, with the reduced material and the pawns being fixed so that they can be exchanged pretty easily, I do think this is closer to a draw than a white win. I mean. Yeah. Certainly, it's not going to be easy to hold, and Caruana has to be commended for holding it. But it's, I think this was not a case necessarily of Nepo not winning the endgame. It was more that just it wasn't actually winning if Black defended well.
Yeah, and Caruana did seem to defend really well this rook endgame. I mean, it was hard. The rook on the third rank for Black is well placed and kind of stops the king from coming in too easily.
I mean, once Black got his rook behind the c pawn and White's rook was stuck on the fourth rank, at that point it's clearly done. This was only like just 10 moves after.
Yeah.
So
Fabiano managed to basically survive the first two from. I mean, in this game he had the advantage at the beginning, I guess, but
Yeah, I mean it's rapid. It's going to be back and
yeah,
forth.
it was definitely a back and forth. So in the third game, they repeat the French, and Fabiano decided not to test him in anything quite as theoretical
Yeah, this
anymore, and he played e takes d5 on move four, which
yeah
they.
this was baffling to me. I mean, he seemed to get such a good position in the previous game. I mean, maybe at least out of the opening, it seems like he was better. I mean, maybe Nepo had prepared one move deeper, and Caruana was, and he quickly got a worse position because he got outplayed, and maybe he was like thinking this is a sign of things going wrong, and I want to look in a different direction, and I wasn't really prepared for it another way, so let's play something on the safe side. But e takes d5. I mean, much like the exchange Slav, I think the exchange French is actually a little bit less toothless than people thought it was some years back, and people have been playing it a bit for white, but it feels so out of the spirit of the position to me.
Yeah.
And I think
Well,
this was.
I actually like the exchange French more by doing it on move three than on move four, but that's just me. Maybe.
I don't know. I once wrote that if you want to become a better chess player, never play any opening with named after an animal or with exchange in its name.
Well, so I started my career maybe this is one of my problems. I started by playing the dragon, which is not exactly an animal, but it's a
It's a
creature.
mythical animal, so it's only half wrong.
Okay. All right. And then you said an animal or what?
Or any opening with exchange in its name.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't play. I don't think I played any opening with
And
exchange.
probably any opening with system in its name is not great for improvement either.
I remember. I remember one time, Grandmaster Larry Christensen told me that he laughed at someone who I won't name who the someone is because he's actually a very respected person also. But someone told him in some tournament that he should consider playing the exchange Slav as a weapon. And Larry Christensen was laughing. Although the exchange Slav does have some venom, and you look at it quite a bit in your.
Yeah,
In
I
your
actually think it's one of the most serious lines against the Slav nowadays. People sort of wrote it off, but I think a large part of that is just who is playing it. Like for a long time, the only people who played the exchange Slav were just I mean, I don't really have PG-13 words I would use to describe them, but people who basically want to force draws with white and kill chess. And at some point, it's like, why do you play chess? I mean, to try to like force a draw and keep the game as boring as possible. But there's sort of been an exchange Slav renaissance nowadays where people who are actually trying to fight for an advantage are playing it, and you know, guys like Magnus are losing with on the black side now and then. I mean, it's a serious line that's worth a try. But in terms of, well, it's not necessarily any worse an attempt for an opening advantage. I mean, that's specifically the exchange Slav. Exchange Spanish, exchange King's Indian, exchange French. These are ones you should really be avoiding. But
yeah.
while exchange Slav is a much more serious attempt at fighting for an advantage than a lot of other exchange variations, it also doesn't really train you to play complicated positions or teach you about specific structures very well. I mean, if you're in it for the long haul and you want to learn to be a better chess player, their opening is going to matter a lot less than middle games and pawn structures. And I think that it sort of deprives you of the chance to like play these lines against good people.
Yeah. So this game will run through quickly, so we have time to look at the last one before the clinic. But it was, I guess, it was a fairly fairly level game, right? There wasn't any huge like missed chances, I don't think, by.
Yeah,
by
I got nothing
player.
to say. Ian clearly solved his problems very easily.
Right. Yeah. So they got into a pawn end game where there was nothing for either side, so they locked things up, and here we go. We go to the last game. The last game that was going to be the decisive one. And
this last one, there was a lot of mistakes because even with very strong players in rapid chess, that's going to happen. But there were two that really stood out to me. I'm wondering if they're the same two for you.
Well, there's one that, because I was listening to our commentators, they harped on it a lot, and so which move are? Let's start. Well, you have two, so I really only have one main one, which was something for white. Around what's that?
Which move did you think was the one that stood out?
So I guess the main moment would be around move like 19 or 20, where white had the chance to play a takes b4 and then c4, and I think
that would have been pretty good.
Yeah, and then that he actually played c4 without taking it at all, which then like seemed to give black a really comfortable.
22 c4 would just demonstrated a serious lack of understanding in the position. I mean,
yeah, so in that position, so I just put that position on the board now, playing, for example, instead of c4, playing a takes b4, and only then c4.
Yeah, that's possible. I also don't love putting the rook on d1. I think it would have been better on c1.
Right.
But also, as you point out, if you're going to play the and basically when Nepo played rook a d1, I think at that moment he had mentally given up on a b4 followed by c4 because if he wanted that pawn, he would have left the rook on a1.
Right.
So I think at that point that was clear. But basically, c4 to me, this was a huge mistake. I mean, it gives black the b4 square for his knight. It gives him the structure here where he has chances to play a4, which he could even do on the very first move at this point.
Yeah.
To try to undermine the queen side. This felt completely anti-positional. I mean, in this position after queen b6, granted, the idea to play a b4 followed by c4 is probably pretty decent. But apart from that specific idea, I think whoever blinks first with these pawns is not going to be very happy that they did. And it seemed like Nepo was the first to do it.
Yeah.
So this, yes, it was basically, I think that after rook a c8 on move 21, yes, a takes b4 would have been stronger, no doubt about it. But like it feels like while he didn't find the best move, he didn't really make a bad move. While playing c4 was affirmatively a bad move, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So then what's the other? What for you? You said there was a second moment, right? That was.
So there were lots of mistakes because in a sharp position in a game like this, that's completely understandable, even with very strong players. But the one that stood out to me was actually quite a bit later, and that was move 54.
Okay, so I'm gonna go. I'm fast forwarding here. The position now I'm on move 32. Already is a pretty unpleasant position for white, but black still has to find a way to break through either with
a bishop on a2. But,
yeah, the bishop on a2 is of course.
Okay, so basically Nepo got outplayed pretty convincingly up to this point, and Caruana got to a very good position. He reached a winning one, but then he drifted a bit. I mean, again, these are
I mean, games. if he had like an hour on his clock, I think he would have played this more accurately. Of course, that's hardly that always happens. Even
I mean, in rapid games, there's going to be lots of mistakes. So that's fine. But,
so all right, so I'm going to fast forward to move 54, which you have.
I don't know in which universe you could ever believe self-pinning your knight like this was a good idea.
Okay, so let's see. So knight d2, queen d1. So you're talking about okay. So in this move, he played rook to d3. This is the move, the self pin of the knight here.
This is mind-boggling to me how you could even consider such a move. I mean, in terms of like its evaluation compared to like the best move, for example, there were much bigger mistakes throughout the game.
Yeah,
and that's fine. That's the nature of chess. If everybody played perfect chess,
you just think it's nonsensical, kind of.
But this move, like it strategically, I mean, what are you doing? Like, how will you ever break this pin? If you move your rook away off of the d file, now you lose your knight. Yeah. If you move your rook forward along the d file, you will lose your f3 pawn. Like, what did you think was going to happen?
Right.
Like,
I see you. Yeah. So like knight c4, I guess was the more knight c4 and followed by maybe. Yeah, I mean.
Okay, I mean after knight c4, black is better, and you will have to defend, and maybe you'll succeed, maybe you won't. But after rook d3, it feels like you almost make it easy. I mean,
yeah, no, and so the rest of the game, I mean, again, they have no time, but it's definitely a difficult position. I mean, Fabiano might have had cleaner ways to win, but it was never.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, like you have to be, but he did find one. He did make one very good decision at the end that I do think we should talk about, which is on move 63.
The king move. Oh, move 63, you're saying? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, after knight e3. I believe if white gets the king to e2, I believe that this position is a draw.
Right. So he plays queen d2, forces the king to go away to the king side.
Somewhere other than e3, basically. Yeah. E2. I think if white's king is on e2, put black queen anywhere on the board, you're not going.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this position, it almost looks like a fortress, but it's very hard for the queen. Always can make these really tricky sort of waiting moves.
I think it would be a fortress with the king on e2.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense because then you can put the rook maybe on the d file, and it's going to be really hard to do anything.
So, for example, if you look at the position after king e6, where Nepomniachtchi played knight f5, like you would very much like to hit the pass button here, and I'm sure that if he could, he would, but he can't because if he were to, for example, play rook a3, which would be my best attempt at passing because the knight coming to f5 changes the position while the rook to a3 doesn't, then after queen c1, you will not stop black's queen from getting to a square like e1 or e1 even, which is going to force, like, so for example, after say rook a3, queen c1, rook b3, queen g1 check, you're going to be forced to play knight g2. And as soon as this knight has to leave, black can get f5 or d5.
Right. Then you can break with d5 or f5, and it's a totally different ball game. So yeah, I mean, so that was a sort of a good decision. Play queen d2, and then the game ends. I'll just walk through the moves quickly again. So he makes good move here, move 68, queen c1, threatening queen to f4. And now it looks like it's just lost because, again, white is sort of forced to leave their knight being on a good square. He made a nice move here, king g6 on move 70, which was maybe not the only good move, but it certainly seemed like a strong one because it sort of forces white to play. Well, he ended up playing f4. I mean, I was thinking king h4, king h6. And again, things just start to collapse here for white. Queen h1 is a big threat. So he played f4, and for people who were playing in a fantasy chess contest, it was already decided whether there would be a mate on the board, but Nepomniachtchi walked into it here with king f5, queen c8, king f6, queen e6.
That was another poor question in fantasy chess. I think it was pretty obvious what the answer was.
Yeah, I picked yes, even though yes had the odds in a you were getting more points for picking yes than no. But I did think that in this time control, with so many games, 8 games every day, that people would no,
I mean, the fantasy chess, I was confused about a lot of things. I think they also had Nepomniachtchi as like a big favorite over Caruana as well. I mean, maybe the format favors Nepomniachtchi. Maybe he's better at internet chess. I guess Caruana wasn't that great in the speed chess championship. But honestly, like, for me, I'm just looking like, wait, let me get this straight. Like, Nepo and Firouzja, who are 2 fantastically strong players, but, Caruana and Ding, who between the 2 of them are clearly 2 and 3 in the world. You pick your order on any given day on some form.
I see.
Like, do we really think that these 2 guys at 2 and 3 in the world are like serious underdogs? It's very strange to me.
All right. Well, that is some words of wisdom for you playing fantasy chess. There's still a lot of rounds to win prizes, and so don't forget to enter your picks.
A good start is if anybody is considered a 3-1 underdog, just take them. Like, I mean, at this point, they're good enough that,
yeah. So this was an interesting day of chess. Some good games. We have, like I showed before, the standings. Tomorrow we have some interesting, and I guess one matchup that people are particularly looking forward to between Magnus looking to get revenge, I guess, against Ali Reza. Of course, very different, playing 15-minute versus playing 3-0 online.
Yeah, it's very different with an increment and without bantering. I mean,
I think Magnus is a pretty big favorite, but we'll see what happens. But I guess I should end this show because we have to move to the opening clinic. I'm going to let you run that, but so we'll end this, and everybody switch to the next show. You should see it in your Chess 24 schedule here. I should say, just in closing, thank you to our sponsor. We have a sponsor, Millennium, here for the after show during the whole tournament, and they have a product, a chessboard that is for sale in our shop. You can check it out if you'd like, and I think it is on a big discount during this tournament. So check it out, and thank you to them for supporting us. And yeah, thanks, Sam, for joining me for this after show. And we'll switch over to the next one as soon as possible. We might be 1 or 2 minutes late, so bear with us. Thanks again.